left off on chapter 7. I mean, we busting her down, okay? I ain't starting nothing on YouTube until Robo Bear shows up. I ain't doing nothing until Robo Bear shows up. What's up? I ain't doing nothing. And then I'm going to find the last chapter and doggy ear it right quick so I could just know, because these chapters be longer than a mug. There's Robo Bear. Now we can get it started. Is this 14 chapters? Let's double check, because medical apartheid is serious business. Okay, 14 chapters. Oh, we halfway in. We are halfway in. Let me put that in the chat. I need to make this a playlist. I need to do a lot of stuff. Chapter 7. Hopefully, I could catch some Care Bears early. Maybe y'all at work. You can put your little earbud in and get it cracking. Um, Also, I need your help. Um, I know it's dark. I know you can't see me, but listen to my voice. Okay? Let me pull it up. Listen to my voice. I need your assistance, okay? I need you to help me break this algorithm one time, okay? I really, really do. And because I feel like I've been shadow banned too long. Instagram don't want to do shit to help me. Um, so we just gonna have to do it together and kick that algorithm's ass. Okay, so I'm really asking for help, and I'm gonna ask for your help, and you could do that by going over to YouTube, going to Real Talking Healthy Food. I'm live right now. So if you see this, come on over. If you've been wanting to read the medical apartheid and you're just too lazy to do it on your own, well, come on over here and let me help your lazy ass, okay? So come on over to Real Talking Healthy Food. We live. It's just me and Robo Bear until the other Care Bears pull up. So I'm gonna just shout out the loyal ones. I'm gonna start doing some giveaways or something. But I know for sure Andrea, Alicia, and Shonda is always gonna pull up. Them is the day ones. So I definitely need to put something for y'all. Okay. But yeah, come on over to the YouTube. I'll see you in a minute. Okay, I always end up doing this. And oh, we are busting this book down. I don't put a lot of hashtags because I feel like those who are interested in this kind of thing will find me. So they no need to be doing all of that. Okay. Now, what I wanted to do on the intro today is look at some of the things that I send myself and talk about it. Um, so one of the things I saw, I think this was yesterday, and this is in regards to I'll just let the video play. And I want to know what y'all think, okay? I'm gonna turn this up. And this is from Rand Paul. I think he used to be the senator of Kentucky or governor or whatever. Whatever he do in those evil ass positions. So here we go. Mutilation has been nearly universally condemned. Genital mutilation has been condemned by the WHO, the United Nations Children's Fund, the United Nations Population. According to the WHO, genital mutilation is recognized internationally as a violation of human rights. Genital mutilation is considered particularly egregious because, as the WHO notes, it's nearly always carried out on minors and is a violation of the rights of children. Most genital mutilation is not typically performed by force, but as WHO notes, that by social convention, social norm, the social pressure to conform,
to do what others do and have been doing, as well as the need to be accepted socially and the fear of being rejected by the community. American culture is now normalizing the idea that minors can be given hormones to prevent their biological development of their secondary sexual characteristics. Dr. Levine, you have supported both allowing minors to be given hormone blockers to prevent them from going through puberty, as well as surgical destruction of a minor's genitalia. Like surgical mutilation, hormonal interruption of puberty can permanently alter and prevent secondary sexual characteristics. The American College of Pediatricians reports that 80 to 95% prepubertal children with gender dysphoria will experience resolution by late adolescence if not exposed to medical intervention and social affirmation. Dr. Levine, do you believe that minors are capable of making such a life-changing decision as changing one's sex?
Well, Senator, thank you for your interest in this question. Transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field with robust research and standards of care that have been developed. And if I am fortunate enough to be confirmed as the Assistant Secretary of Health, I look forward to working with you and your office and coming to your office and discussing the particulars of the standards of care for transgender medicine.
The specific question was about minors. Let's be a little more specific since you evaded the question. Do you support the government intervening to override the parent's consent to give a child puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and or amputation surgery of breasts and genitalia? You have said that you're willing to accelerate the protocols for street kids. I'm alarmed that poor kids with no parents who are homeless and distraught, you would just go through this and allow that to happen to a minor. I would hope that you would have compassion for Kira Bell, who's a 23-year-old girl who was confused with her identity. At 14, she read on the internet about something about transsexual. She thought, well, maybe that's what I am. She ended up getting these puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones. She had her breasts amputated. But here's what ultimately she says now. And this is a very insightful decision from someone who made a mistake but was led to believe this was a good thing by the medical community. I made a brash decision as a teenager, as a lot of teenagers do, trying to find confidence and happiness, except now the rest of my life will be negatively affected, she said, adding the medicalized gender transitioning was a very temporary, superficial fix for a very complex identity issue. What I'm alarmed at is that you're not willing to say absolutely minors shouldn't be making decisions to amputate their breast or to amputate their genitalia. For most of our history, we have believed that minors don't have full rights and the parents need to be involved. So I'm alarmed that you won't say with certainty that minors should not have the ability to make the decision to take hormones that will affect them for the rest of their life. You make a more firm decision on whether or not minors should be involved in these decisions?
Senator, transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field, and if confirmed to the position of Assistant Secretary of Health, I would certainly be pleased to come to your office and talk with you and your staff about the standards of care and the complexity of this field.
Let it go into the record that the witness refused to answer the question. The question is a very specific one. Should minors be making these momentous decisions? For most of the history of medicine, we wouldn't let you have a cut sewn up in the ER, but you're willing to let a minor take things that prevent their puberty. You think they get that back? You give a woman testosterone enough that she grows a beard, do you think she's going to go back looking like a woman when you stop the testosterone? You have permanently changed them. Infertility is another problem. None of these drugs have been approved for this. They're all being used off-label. I find it ironic that the left that went nuts over hydroxychloroquine being used possibly for COVID are not alarmed that these hormones are being used off-label. There's no long-term studies. We don't know what happens to them. We do know that there are dozens and dozens of people who've been through this who regret that this happened and a permanent change happened to them. And, if you've ever been around children, 14-year-olds can't make this decision. In the gender dysphoria clinic in England, 10% of the kids are between the ages of 3 and 10. We should be outraged that someone's talking to a 3-year-old about changing their sex.
That's right.
I can't vote for you if you can't.
Thank you so much, Senator Paul. Senator Levine, thank you for answering the question.
So check this out. Now that's my thing right there. That's my thing with the whole situation. I'm like, even though I don't fuck with Lady Gaga, but I'm on some Lady Gaga-ish, baby. I was born this way. Or maybe you're grown that way, okay? Maybe you wasn't born that way. Maybe you just was like, yo, I'm grown this way, okay? I'm gonna be like intro. Well, they'll figure it out. But I'm just like, do what you gotta do. Do what gets you on deck, okay? Like whatever floats your boat, okay, and rocks your socks off, okay. But here's the thing. This is the thing. When people, if they're so ill about this community, right? If they're so ill about, you know, this freedom of orientation, right? Because I'm hella fucking, shadow banned. They watching Robo Bear watching my every move. So what I'm saying is this: don't be coming to the kids with your bullshit. That's my only thing. Like now it started as a joke. You know what I mean? It's starting to become a joke. People's real life situations are being affected um, by these decisions. And I think that, you know, when you take people's choices away, that's a problem. Thank you for coming in here. Shout out to you. It's just me, you, and Robo Bear. And I showed a video about Senator Rand Paul discussing the matters of minors having the rights to change their genitalia or in their gender. Right. So I feel like just like any other thing, you should wait till you're an adult. You get to sort out those weirdo emotions that you have as a kid. You get to find your way through being bullied. I mean, it's going to happen. Like bullying is going to happen to you. Kids are hella rude. It is what it is, right? But I think that no parent should be manipulating their child into thinking that way, especially at the ages 3, 4, and 5. There's no reason why a transgender should be hosting story time. There's no reason why that should be introduced in elementary school, junior high, or high school. I feel that that is an adult decision. If you feel like that's what you want to do, then you grown as fuck. You could do whatever you want to do. The kids are mad impressionable. They already got other shit that they got to deal with, and then now it's this. So it's just like, no, I feel like that is an adult decision. Not that their parents get to dictate how they want to be. If you feel like you are attracted to the same sex, you're gonna bag and marry the same sex and create a family with the same sex. By all means, do you, boo boo. But leave the fucking kids out your grown ass decisions. That's all I'm saying. Just like they passed the law in California where you could be as young as 14 years old dating someone 10 years older than you. There's no reason under the sun that no 14-year-old child should be in any type of relationship, situationship, or situation with a 24-year-old man or woman or other or whatever the fuck you are calling yourself. You know what I'm saying? There's no reason. And that's where I have a problem. They're desensitizing people from recognizing that they're introducing this into to children, right? And then if we really look into history, because you have to understand that, I feel in my mind it helps me understand things better, right? Looking back, because the creator or one of the founders of that community, of the alphabet community, right? They was a pedophile. He supports probably shouldn't have said that word, but he supports NAMBLA, which is a group that has um brought it to court. They brought this to court that they want to erase the age gap between children and adults. And Harry, which is one of the founders of the alphabet community, like they are for that action. Even the rainbow colors are changing, which indicates the implementation of this plan. You know what I'm saying? Like it's the pastel blue and pink. They're now putting that. They're getting you used to seeing these symbols. It's usually a double heart. It's always a double heart, some kind of shape, form, or fashion. I encourage you to, especially if you have children you love. I don't have children yet. I have 2 nephews, 2 nieces. I have 4 godchildren. No, I have 3 nieces, two nephews, and 4 godchildren that I love very, very much. I done spent a check on my nephew, okay, this past on my niece and my nephew this weekend, okay? I busted a whole check on them kids, okay? So I know I'm not the only one who got children in their lives that they love very much. So that's the only reason why I'm mentioning this, because people are trying to jump on the bandwagon of civil rights using those same statements, speeches, and cries for help for this deceitful and malicious agenda. And I don't care about somebody as a grown person doing what makes them happy, whether we agree with it or not. I am in some way or some form, the person that roots for the bad guy or goes with the underdog. I've always been that kind of person, right? um, which is why I started doing so much research about the alphabet community, because I was volunteering, I was putting in work out here, okay? So I couldn't just be a part of something and not know anything about the struggle, right? And there still really is a struggle. Like these transgender women are getting kidnapped and they ass whooped just for being themselves. I saw that growing up myself, right? But we're not gonna align our shit with other people's shit. I think that's disrespectful. So I think we need to keep it honest. If we keep the issues that we're involved in, we feel passionately about. I feel like if we're honest about that, then we wouldn't be piggybacking off of what somebody else's issue is and what they're fighting for, right? Because that's fucked up. And that's just wrong. You know what I'm saying? There's no reason why a transgender woman should be infiltrating Black women's spaces, right? If you like things like Black Girl Magic, feeling some kind of way about that, if you are wanting to do what it is that you need to do, carve your own lane and make your space. I shouldn't be opening the Essence for that's a magazine for Black women and things like that. And I'm seeing a transgender person on the cover. Don't implement your terminology on me if I don't agree with it. If I shouldn't be forced to agree with some things that I don't want to agree with, like one, putting that number one, not knowing your history about the community that you're so loud and proud about. That's number one. You should be ashamed of yourself. And if you're really about your community, you would acknowledge that and maybe create a different type of community. Stop being fucking lazy. Okay. The other thing is, with the children, what's so special about you that you gotta fucking, mislead and misguide children? Wasn't nobody imposing their shit on you when you was a kid. You got to grow up and feel how you wanted to naturally. You grew into whatever it is that you label yourself, right? But that doesn't mean you get to impose your terminology on me. If I say I'm a naturally born woman with this irritating ass period every month, and that means you're gonna respect that. You don't get to add shit to what you know what I'm saying? What you call me because you feel different about you. I don't feel different about me. I don't feel like you. You know what I'm saying? So let's keep it cute. Let's keep it fair. And then we won't have all these issues with it, especially within the Black community. We wouldn't have all this dividing and shit. I think people just need to stay in their own fucking lanes. And then that way you won't be causing no accidents. And everybody could get to their destination nice and smooth. I mean, that's all I'm saying. And I don't feel like who you lay down with is so important that it needs to be off in the course. So the intro done ended up being almost 20 minutes. Now we on chapter 7 in this medical apartheid book. Um, and y'all, it's about to get gully because we're getting into the Tuskegee Airmen. On the last chapter, what we were discussing, let me go back and just scan some pages. This was during the Civil War, emancipation, Chapter 6 was about that, where we had soldiers, which was a little difficult to talk about because, like most of us, people in our family has served, especially our great grandparents and things like that, because a lot of them, you was either picking cotton or you was out there fighting for their cause. Okay. And this is during those times. And what was so ill, they would come off the battlefields, right? And they'll be getting blasted and all that shit, just like the next man. And they would leave them there and barely treat them. You know, they have bodies on bodies. They wasn't burying people the right way. In chapter 5, I think we learned about how the Georgia was it the GMC or the Georgia College of Medicine? I think it's a GCM. They how they discovered all these carcasses in the basement of where they would do the autopsies. Just body parts scattered everywhere. Just the disregard to Black life, period. You know what I'm saying? Was just so disheartening. They even had people digging up the slaves' graves and sending the bodies to the medical facilities for educational purposes. They were even snatching up folks and saying that they going in for one thing, kill those fools and send them to the schools. Okay, a lot of the schools that they mentioned, um, it's in chapter 5 and 6. Chapter 5 mostly is the parts where they were sending the bodies to like Harvard's medical school. Howard was one of them, which is a Black school. Okay. What else? They mentioned the Georgia Medical School often, very, very often. A lot of the historically Black colleges were pretty open about their use of Black bodies and the bodies being dug up from the graves for autopsy purposes. They talked about in those last chapters how Black bodies were being used on display without consent. They gave a specific story. I forgot the lady's name, but they had her mother on display for a really, really long time. But she, as of now, is still on display. Her skeleton is on display because she had a bone disease that deformed her so ill that they, found it really interesting. And what's so ill is they would take these a lot of Black patients from different hospitals that would die. They would label them as Jane Does, and they wouldn't have proper burials and shit like that. They would just use them up and throw the carnage, anywhere. You know what I'm saying? Um, and until recently, nowadays they do have proper memorial services where they give them a proper burial. But during the times that we're talking about, which was like in the 30s, 20s, 30s, and 40s, that's the time we finally moved into. She's still reaching back, into the 1850s, 60s, and 70s, and bringing it up into the 20s, 30s, and 40s. Okay, because we touched the Civil War. Well, we touched on a war, and then she moved the timeline up. So now we're into the part where she's about to go into the Tuskegee Airmen. I touched on a few things, but if you want the real deal, you got to watch chapter 6. So, and chapter 5 was really, really hard. A really hard read. Chapter 6 was also hard as well, but I think chapter 5 was really hard. I think chapter 7 is going to be another one of those because we know on the surface, I guess from our family members, teachers, and things like that, um, about the Tuskegee Airmen, but she brings the receipts from the doctors in. And that really exposes the racism, because they really looked at us as guinea pigs and test dummies. And then they will do the real shit on the white folks. You know what I'm saying? And they would just practice on us. I mean, they even talked about how it was a rite of passage for medical students to pose with the bodies, putting hats and shit on them, making them hold cigarettes and shit, and they dead as a mug, just spread all open and shit. And that was literally a rite of passage into, I guess, getting your white coat or your stethoscope. I think it was. They talked about some of the souvenirs that, oh my gosh, they had this one thing where the medical students will go out with their scalpels and axes and shit like that, and they would fuck black people up. It would be like a that's where barbecue comes from, which I did not fucking know. But like how they would hang our ancestors and roast them on the fire. Well, it was like a medical version of that shit, where they would take all their tools that they used to do the autopsies and learn about the body. They would use those tools to on the bodies, to on the black folks. You know what I'm saying? And during those times, they had so much laws that would get either people locked up or put in these fucked up positions where they would take those bodies or kill them off without no problems, and send the body out for medical research and things like that. The shit is ill. They even use black folks or black men in particular, especially the strong black men, strong and weight, just diesel ass. They would use them to pull bodies out the grave too. They called them they called the weirdo doctors night doctors, and they called the chapter 5 is called Restless Dead. What did they call them again? Oh man, Addie Mae, that was the one lady. It was an ill name, but it was a name like they just threw around like it wasn't nothing. Not body snatchers. Um, Dang, I wish I could. Grave robbers. That's why what I also learned. That's why. Um, that's why they put the gates around the cemeteries, because of that. They started, and black cemeteries started doing that shit first because of the medical grave robbing that was going on at the time. Isn't that fucking ill? What did they call those fools? I thought I could find it really quick, but I can't. But I did figure out it's the Medical College of Georgia, which they mentioned a lot, where the skeletons of our ancestors were being conjured up. Um, But yeah, so let's get into chapter 7. I'm already talking 30 minutes in, but I had to share that video with y'all about the kids, because I don't play about the kids. So chapter 7, a notoriously syphilis-soaked race. Let me guess, that was a doctor who said that. Here's a quote from Thomas Murrell, MD. I'm tired of you. Public Health Services, 1910. The future of the Negro lies more in the research laboratory than in the schools. When diseased, he should be registered and forced to take treatment before he offers his diseased mind and body on the altar of the academic and professional education. Another quote from Oliver Clarence Wenger, MD, and also from the U.S. Public Health Service, and this is from 1950. We now know where we could only surmise before that we have contributed to their ailments and shortened their lives. Whoa, the difference 40 years can make, right? Okay. In 1932, the U.S. Public Health Service inaugurated its study of syphilis in the untreated Negro male, Tuskegee Syphilis Study, which promised to free medical care to about 600 sick, desperately poor sharecroppers in Macon County, Alabama. The study was designed the PHS explained, to study the progression of syphilis in Black men. Scientists had long claimed that the venereal disease manifested differently in Blacks than in whites, and the PHS scientists decided to document this by finding a pool of infected Black men, withholding treatment from them, and then charting the progression of symptoms and disorders. Pause. That's fucked up. How are you going to do that? But the PHS lied to the subjects, convincing them that they were being treated and not studied. When the men died, the physician researchers determined to autopsy them in order to trace precisely the ravages of the disease in their bodies. Among other things, the PHS expected to validate its belief in a specific racial dysmorphism of syphilis, whereas the disease was thought to do its worst damage to the neurological systems in the brains of whites. It was thought to wreak its worst havoc on the cardiovascular system of Blacks, sparing the relatively primitive and underdeveloped brains. Wow. So that right there, as this book has been doing, it's confirming my paranoia, confirming my suspicions with these doctors, because they could be doing experiments on your ass and you just ain't got a clue, you know? So the part of this is called The Best Intentions. If you're following along, we're on page 158. Um, the origin of the Tuskegee study was a benign one. However, in 1989, when Booker T. Washington, founder of Tuskegee Institute, met wealthy philanthropist Julius Rosenwald, founder of Sears, Roebuck and Company. They were mutually impressed. The head of the Rosenwald Foundation, who had a history of initiating self-sustaining Black economic programs, had already generously um, supported beneficent research and self-sustaining industrial initiatives among Black Southerners. He recognized in Tuskegee Institute a potential center of Black industry, and in Washington, the man who could realize this potential. Rosenwald also realized that Tuskegee's promise was surrounded by the grounding poverty, public vacuum, poor health, and rampant infectious disease of Macon County, and that this dreary indigence, I'm sorry, y'all, the sun's starting to go down. I need it. Indigence would stifle its potential workforce and limit its industrial growth together. He and Washington planned a Tuskegee based program to provide medical treatment for Macon County, a system that began in earnest in the late 1920s. By that time, slavery had ended in Macon County nearly 70 years later, but in name only, except for the staff and students of Tuskegee Institute, later to be Tuskegee University. Most of the county's 27,000 Blacks lived the same lives as had their enslaved forebears. In 1932, 82% of its residents were Black, and half of these lived far below the poverty line. Their median income was $1 a day, but like their enslaved forebears, they never saw a dollar from one year to the next. Trapped in the cycle of tenant cotton farming, they were chained by debt and forced to work the same land as had their enslaved grandparents. And like Alabama's slaves, they owned nothing, not even the crumbling shacks that they lived in. These sharecroppers, including children, were weighed down by 100-pound bags of cotton, living and working under the orders of white landowners who kept them from economic thraldom by paying low prices for their crops and charging inflated prices for food, seed, and other necessities. Those Blacks who tried to flee the land were arrested, punished, and returned, or worse, just as their enslaved grandparents would have been. Beatings, lynchings, and murders that were never investigated enforced Black serfdom. The strictly segregated schools were poorly equipped and sparsely staffed. And And in any event, few families would spare children from the fields long enough for them to learn and read and write well. Oh my God, that affects a lot of us more than we know. I know a lot of people who say often, I got a lot of older friends and don't, they know money, okay? But they reading and writing skills is on the same level as my 6-year-old nephew. The only things blacks had was a great deal of illness, kind of like today. But medical care did not exist for most of them. 15 of the 16 doctors practicing in the county were white. And although the overworked black doctor would see patients for trade, a chicken, some greens, whatever patients could spare, the rest wanted their fee in cash, plus $1 a mile. God damn, they only getting one. The 4 doctors of the John A. Andrew Veterans Hospital tried to care for the sick blacks who appeared at its doors, but they could help only a fraction of them, for their job was to care for the staff and students of Tuskegee Institute. Poor nutrition, a lack of decent housing, and rampant infectious diseases from malaria to tuberculosis to syphilis haunted the sharecroppers of Macon County. The 1929 syphilis survey of Black Alabama residents, commissioned by Taliaferro Clark, chief of the PHS Venereal Disease Division. Damn, they got a whole division now. I'm sorry, y'all, determined a high rate of 36% in Macon County. However, some other Alabama counties had higher rates, so this could not have been the chief impetus for the study. It is it is more likely that the presence of Tuskegee Institute and later the John A. Andrew Veterans Hospital made the site a scientifically attractive one. The survey also suggested that although treatment could eradicate the disease, 99% of the cases in blacks had never been treated. Of course, because they plotting on them. Hey, chocolate, boom, what up, though? Syphilis was indeed a serious threat to the health and productivity. The disease is caused by a type of bacterial organism named, oh my God, Spirocheta. Oh my God, don't laugh at me, y'all. Pallida, or more specifically, Treponema pallidum. I better learn these words. I got to study for my license, man. A spiral shape. Spiral sheds are named for their shape. Okay, that makes sense. Spiral sheds. I told y'all these medical terms are hard. Okay. I'm in cosmetology. I don't know about medical terms. No, just playing. Okay. Spiral sheds are named for their spiral shape. Under a microscope, the worm-like bacteria wiggle furiously. T. pallidum can be acquired through sexual activity. Oh my God, from an infected mother. The initial stage of sexual transmitted syphilis or hard, um, I'm sorry, y'all, a chancre or hard, painless spore appears on the genitals or other point of entry, followed by flu-like symptoms. If the disease is not treated, it enters a long, latent secondary stage before emerging, oh my God, to an afflict assortment of skin growths, running sores. Oh my God, I'm sorry, y'all, if I'm grossing you out. Um, running sores, bone decay, and heart damage. The final tertiary stage of syphilis may erupt several decades later, causing profound neurological damage, blindness, insanity, paralysis, and death. Because 30 years or more can intervene between the onset of syphilis and the dramatic mental symptoms of paresis, or the third stage of syphilis. Okay, it was thought to be a separate mental disease until the mid 1940s. Oh my God, until the mid 1940s. So people was just getting jacked up. 1940s, when antibiotics, particularly penicillin, were discovered to cure it, and it was um, belatedly recognized as the final stage of an infectious illness, syphilis. Whoa, syphilis is scary than a mug, ain't it? Ooh, you better wrap it up or stay celibate. Fuck that. That sounds horrible. Rosenwald responded by earmarking money for syphilis treatment programs. Unfortunately, his wealth was consumed in the stock market crash of 1929. Damn. And with it vanished the support for Macon County's economic and disease treatment programs. The U.S. Public Health Service, PHS, um, stepped in, but PHS physicians never share Rosenwald's goal of Black self sufficiency. The writings of its doctors reveal a lack of faith in African Americans' ability to manage their own economic and health issues. They try to play that shit when they started their medical schools too. In chapter 5, y'all watch chapter 5, they pulled that shit on them too, except for Howard and something else. But that's because they was giving them the bodies, the dead bodies, and they had a connect. I mean, I don't want to use drug terms, but they had like a connect, a real live dead body connect. And that's, I think that's why they was put on. But PHS physician Thomas W. Merrill, MD, these names, boy, Rosenwalds and Mural, who the fuck got, anyway, he expressed ambivalence about the possibility and even the advisability of eradicating syphilis among Blacks. And this is what he says. So the scourge sweeps among them. Those that are treated are only half cured, and the effort to assimilate a complex civilization drives their diseased minds until the results are criminal records. Perhaps here, in conjunction with tuberculosis, will be the end of the Negro problem. Disease will accomplish what man cannot do. Okay. PHS doctors portrayed Black Alabamans as resistant to health measures, intellectually inferior, impetus, degenerate, and above all, at the mercy of frighteningly powerful sexual drive. Quote, morality among these people is almost a joke and only assumed as a matter of convenience. You disrespectful bitch. I told you he gets on my nerves. What's up, Nietzsche girl? Oh my God. He sneered this, by the way. Such medical speculation fostered an image of African Americans as sexually promiscuous and infected with syphilis, and an impression that doctors reinforced with their piety sayings. Quote, virtue in the Negro race is like angels' visits, few and far in between. In a practice of 16 years in the South, I have never examined a virgin over 14 years of age, alleged Dr. Daniel D. Quillen of Athens, Georgia. Their point was that such sexual irresponsibility doomed Blacks to chronic syphilitic infection. First of all, we're not going to sit up here. I mean, ooh, that just made me grouchy. Okay, but we know if they was not virgins at that age, then more than likely they was being raped by some white dude. Like, let's keep it a buck. And I just find it so interesting how in their own medical journals they completely disregard Black women. And I'm gonna make a video about women's month, because it's supposedly women's month. Women's month is not for us. I covered that in my video. I'm gonna put it in the thing if somebody's watching it back. Um It's in my videos. It's one of my early videos from last year. They didn't give a fuck about us then. They actually don't give a fuck about us now, okay? Only if we got some money or something, or we could do something for them. The PHS castigated blacks as a notoriously syphilis-soaked race. And Mural predicted another 50 years will find an unsyphilitic Negro a freak unless some such procedure as vaccination comes to the relief of the race, and that in the hands of a compelling law. Okay, first of all, how he gonna say that when they're knowingly testing on black folks? Like, this is a whole test. This is not like, ooh, they just picking up, like, ooh, we just picking some shit up off the ground at the bottom of our feet, okay? This is some like real experimentation shit. And then they go and push this propaganda on us like we're just fucking everything in fucking sight. Now maybe nowadays, yeah, because they had those sex farms in breaking when Tariq Nasheed drops that video, we are definitely doing a movie night for that. I left y'all hanging on the Judas movie, but I have real life shit going on. But out in the DMV, out in Washington and shit like that, they had them buck breaking stables and shit where they would have even the kids fucking their own parents and shit. Like it was ill, and I think that pathology has came down through us. But anyway, the PHS castigated blacks as notoriously syphilis-soaked race, and Mill predicted another 50 years will find an unsyphilitic Negro a freak unless some such procedure as vaccination comes to the relief of the race, and that in the hands of a compelling law. Dr. Frank Lightston theorized that black men were more likely than white men to spread venereal diseases, which is a whole ass lie because they didn't care about us being raped, molested. They didn't give a fuck about that. How the fuck you think we had all those mulattoes and shit like that? It wasn't because, girl, the Negro, and you know what's so ill now? Let me just add this too, because I'm into other shit. I'm into the other shit, okay, and for other reasons, which I don't care to share right now. But they do have on these sites black men who are couples that like the cuck holding and things like that, where they specifically want black men to breed their wives. And I just kind of feel are the white women that call themselves Queen of Spades, and they tattoo it on themselves like a spade. Meanwhile, not 40, 50 short years ago, they was calling us spades. So I don't know how any black woman or black man could participate in that voluntarily in a sexual manner, knowing how they look at us. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. You guys should look into that. It's ill. It's really ill. That race play and all of that, it's very real. It's very real and very active today. I promise you. I looked at it earlier today. Um, where was I at? The Negro's well-known sexual impetuosity may account for more abrasions of the I'm sorry, I got this crease, man. Integument of the sexual organs, and therefore more frequent infections than are found in the white race. With imagination rather than evidence at his guide, Dr. S.S. Hinman estimated the national prevalence of syphilis among blacks as 95%. Ain't that what I just said? They're completely making shit up and then pushing the propaganda that we just passing this shit around, knowing good and damn well that they're doing a fucking experiment on us. But they're pushing this out as real medical science because they have the fucking titles. But because clinical examinations did not support such widespread infection among Blacks, Dr. Joseph Moore, um, militated for the Wassermann test, and this is spelled Wassermann, Wassermann test on all Black men, opinioning that a mere history of a penile sore only would not be adequate, as the average Negro has as many penile sores as a rabbit has offspring. That is revolting. That is revolting. I told y'all this chapter gonna be a hard read. Ain't some can't hang, man. Some can't hang. The test was notoriously nonspecific, and men who suffer from related illness such as yaws also tested positive. Because yaws, a common non-venereal infectious disease endemic to West Africa, is caused by a subspecies of the Treponema pallidum bacterium that causes syphilis. In 1932, yaws was prevalent in the South, especially among Blacks, not for racial reasons, but because it is abetted by conditions of poverty. People who were malnourished and exposed to the elements went shoeless and were prone to frequent injuries that broke the skin, the sort that cotton pickers experience daily. Mm. They were vulnerable to infections by pathogens that called yaws. Unlike syphilis, yaws causes no long-term cardiovascular or neuronal damage. Macon County's high prevalence of syphilis, coupled with the nearly perfect treatment vacuum, suggested to Clark, not not a need for treatment, but an opportunity for experimentation. In 1932, the Tuskegee syphilis study officially began when he suggested that the PHS save the expense of the treatment by merely observing the course of the disease in Blacks and publishing the data. Damn shame, just making shit up. PHS doctors frequently defended their failure to offer therapy by insisting that Blacks with syphilis would never voluntarily seek treatment. But how the fuck would they know to do that when they don't even know they're being experimented on? That makes zero fucking sense. How, Sweat? How, Sweat? You know, these chapters be thick, girl. I be wanting to know when it ends, especially with all these medical terms. Let me find my spot. Oh my God, it's a long read. Oh shit, oh shit, we're gonna be moving into some ill shit. So this chapter extra long, y'all. I hope you ready. That's why I started early too. However, this does not explain why they entice study subjects by disguising the experiment as the treatment program promised by Rosenwald. The PHS doctors knew that that being cared for by a physician who professed himself devoted to restoring their health would be godsend to the sick. Forgotten Blacks of Macon County, accordingly to, Forgotten Blacks of Macon County, period. I just run past them periods like they not even there. Okay. Um, Accordingly, the PHS announced a day of free health assessments and screening tests that would be performed in Macon County. It's a trick. PHS nurse Eunice Rivers, we was talking about her a while ago, remembers that the clinic was overflooded with people coming in to get their blood drawn. Oliver Clarence, OC, Wagner, MD, wrote, of course the crowd milled around like so many sheep, adding 316 were given treatment before 2 p.m. Most had never seen a doctor before. The physicians ran various tests while telling the men that they were being treated for a nebulous disorder, bad blood, which commonly refers to a wide array of symptoms from anemic blood to muscle aches, general malaise, disorders such as parasitic infections, gonorrhea, syphilis, and other venereal diseases. Doctors dispense treatment in the form of vitamins, ineffectual doses of arsenic, and worse than unless mercury salve. Hold on, I'm skipping a part. Effectual doses of arsenic and worse than useless mercury salve to those they suspected of having syphilis. Mercury had been used to treat syphilis for centuries, but as described in chapter 1, it was ineffectual. This caused devastating side effects such as injury to the nervous system, profound mental deficits, hair and tooth loss, kidney and heart disease, and lung injury. However, doctors withheld the state of the art treatment for syphilis, which in 1932 consisted of arsenic compounds such as, oh my God, arsphenamine, and neoarsenphenamine, also known by their trade names as Salvarsan or 606. These were developed by German biochemist Paul Ehrlich in 1910, and they were typically partnered with mercury ointments as therapy. After the first clinics enabled doctors to identify syphilitics they selected by study participants. They wanted only men they wanted only men whose signs and symptoms were on the exterior genitalia and therefore easier to identify than lesions hidden between the genitalia of women. Okay. They also wanted to exclude men whose syphilis was the result of a recent infection because doctors could not be sure of choosing sick men if they chose those in the secondary or later stages of infection. Identifying such study candidates entailed taking painstaking medical histories and performing painful medical risky spinal taps. Oh my God. Ostensibly to determine the extent of syphilis's neurological involvement. When the PHS sent out notices to invite subjects for spinal taps, the wording clearly indicated that participants were recruited under the guise of treatment. Okay, so here is the ad. Some time ago, you were given a thorough examination, and since that time, we hope that you have gotten a great deal of treatment for bad blood. You will now be given your last chance to get a second examination. This examination is a very special one, and after it is finished, you'll be given a special treatment if it is believed that you are in a condition to stand it. Remember, this is your last chance for special free treatment. Be sure to meet the nurse. Wow. So they hella tricked them into this shit. Let's see, some more. When another throng appeared seeking a second examination, the PHS ran the spinal taps and selected 399 men with syphilis as subjects to observe. Again, doctors dispensed inadequate medications such as aspirin, which was craved as a miracle drug by the overworked, sickly men who marveled at how its usage was got rid of their aches and pains. Raymond Vondelier, MD, Taliaferro Clark's successor, later added a control group of 200 uninfected men who were also wooed with medication. When a dozen of these men developed syphilis over the 40-year course of the experiment, they were simply transferred to the infected group, a blatant violation of experimental design. Perfect separation of infected and control groups was necessary for any accurate and truly objective comparison of their health states. By switching a man from the control group to the infected group, the physicians falsified data, because they reported an event. In this case, a syphilis infection and its concomitant, excuse me, concomitant symptoms as transpiring in an infected member, while in fact it actually happened to be a control group member. This switching also artificially reduced the number of men in the relatively small control group who went on to contract syphilis. The comparison over the entire course of the disease, which was the ostensible purpose of the study, was made impossible when someone was switched from active to the control group after disease had been progressing for some time before diagnosis. Vondelier confessed in a letter to Clark, "It is my desire to keep the main purpose of the work from the Negroes in the county." Oh, wow. And to continue their interest. Let me make sure. Okay, yeah. We're good. Continue their interest in treatment, but there was no treatment. The next year in 1933, PHS doctors went on to write of, quote, bringing these cases to autopsy, end of quote. If any doubts lingered about the PHS physician's intention to withhold treatment, O.C. Wenger, the PHS senior officer for his syphilis programs, swept them aside that year. Quote, as I see it, we have no further interest in these patients until they die, end of quote. Like Joyce Heth, the aged Black woman who was displayed, that's the lady I was talking about earlier, been dissected for profit by B.T. Barnum. These men were regarded by an impatient PHS as living cadavers, more valuable to American medicine dead than alive. Wenger, who has been portrayed as a public health hero in Paul de Cruz's 1938 book, The Fight for Life, eagerly awaited the men's death because autopsies would be necessary to confirm the diagnosis and the extent of injury caused by their untreated disease. Wow. Wow. These reports would be compared with those on the bodies of control subjects to characterize in terrible detail the ravages of syphilis. However, the physicians anticipated difficulty in obtaining the men's bodies for autopsy, largely because, as was discussed in Chapter 5, African Americans bitterly resented the fact that their bodies were often stolen, exploited for anatomical examination. Wagner wrote Vondelier. Oh, let me get on the live one time, y'all. Hold on. And if you sliding through, please hit the like, hit the subscribe. I need your help to get to 1,000 because I've been having some problems. And let me turn on this light. I'm struggling. Taco getting restless. Okay, y'all. Let me get up in this live one time. My thing right here. Before I get into this quote that Vondelier wrote to, that Wenger wrote to Vondelier. Okay? One time for your mind. Let me just switch this out. Make sure you hit the like. Make sure you subscribe. Check out my other videos. I got recipes. I'll be talking about some real ass shit. So if you for that real ass shit and you know that somebody is extra for that, then let them know about your girl so they could get their learn on with us. You feel me? So let me just get on here for a little bit so I could let the Care Bears know that we in here and we ready, okay? So let's go ahead and do that right quick. You know I be struggling with the Instagram. Don't act like you don't know. Hold on. Hold on. Okay, let's go live. And because I'm raw, I need a filter on my Instagram, girl. Because I'm so rough, so tough out here, baby. I need those stars right quick. Where are the stars? They don't got the stars? Well, I guess I'll use the hearts. I like the hearts. So we are in chapter 7, okay, of the medical apartheid. We're halfway through the book. Okay, we're almost on part 2 because remember, all these chapters are part of a part 1 of the 3 parts of this book, okay? So I'm at the part where I'm about to read what the physician Wenger wrote Vondelier. This is one danger in the latter plan, and that is if the colored population becomes aware that accepting free hospital care means a post mortem. Oh my God. There is one danger in the latter plan, and that's if the colored population becomes aware that accepting free hospital care means a post mortem. Every darky will leave Macon County. The only way we are going to get postmortems is to have the demise take place in Dibbles. And this is another doctor, Eugene Dibble, MD, the African American director of the Tuskegee Medical Center. Oh, wow. So he said, the only way we're going to get postmortems is to have the demise take place in Dibble's hospital when these colored folk are told that Dr. Dibble is now a government doctor too. They will have more confidence because we couldn't trust them. So now, oh wow, how um dreadful. Okay. The Surgeon General enlisted the Tuskegee hospitals to provide a site for spinal taps and autopsies, and he accordingly gave Dibble a PHS appointment. But because they feared losing track of the men before autopsy, the PHS doctors added inducements that maintained the treatment fiction. Eunice Rivers, the eldest daughter of a Georgia farmer and one of only 4 Black public health nurses in the state of Alabama, was recruited from her dispiriting job as a night nurse at the John A. Andrew Hospital to serve as a scientific assistant to assist in procedures and examinations and to keep track of the men. Mm-mm. Rivers looked in on the men periodically and dispensed the medications, mostly aspirin, iron tonic, and vitamins. That made them believe they were in treatment. Rivers injected a bit of a variety into their lives of drudgery and dispiriting poverty when she drove them into town for their doctor's appointments in a shiny black car and distributed the occasional inducements of $1 or two. She waited while they visited friends and marveled at the manicured university lawns and the painted shops on the city streets. She listened sympathetically to the litany of sicknesses, deaths, and family woes and helped when she could. She interceded on their behalf when the doctor, especially brusque or um, derisive. She was their friend. However, the men did not know that Rivers was also charged with tracking their movements, ultimately to ensure their presence at autopsy, which she didn't mention to the men but would describe to their survivors as an operation to gain their assent. So, oh my God, that is so deep. So that I think I missed that war briefing with Vicky Diller when she was talking about Eunice Rivers. It might be Eunuch Rivers. It's an ugly name either way. But I think that's what she was talking about on that. And make sure y'all watch Vicky Diller. If you don't watch me, tap into her 6:30 every day on Fine Nubian Queen. She's ill as fuck. And she don't cuss as much as I do. Okay, the PHS doctors still feared that men would evade the hospital and die at home, cheating the researchers of the chance to autopsy them. So they offered free burials as an inducement. Oh my God, that is so fucking ill. If she knew this, yet she was still misleading her own people, bitch. The Milbank Fund, an organization with strong eugenic leanings, agreed to pay the $50 fee, which was split by the funeral parlor and the physician who performed the autopsy. The men had the peace of mind of knowing they would not end up unburied or in potter's field. But this reassurance was illusory because the chief reason they feared indignant burial was their fear of being autopsied first. And this was to be their precise medical fate. Damn. The syphilitic men were monitored so well that most received no treatment for 40 years, despite the myriad dramatic changes in the medical landscape between 1932 and 1972. In 1934, PHS doctors met with local doctors and asked them not to treat the men who were receiving care in the research study. The Black doctors agreed. Bitch, what? Listen, come on over to YouTube. This is where the Care Bears is at. Oh my God. Girl, girl. Not only do we got Eunice Rivers knowing that, knowing their fate, okay? Now they went around and asked doctors to assist in the bullshit. Do you call them a Sambo or not? I mean, listen, y'all on the gram, come on over to YouTube. I need my phone. Girl, I'm grouchy about that. So how is you as a whole Black person, okay, knowing what the fuck is going on, but it's just like that other Black dude back off in chapter 3. It had to be either chapter 2 or 3 when they was talking about our boy. What's that fool's name with the sharp teeth? When they was talking about him, and he went to the white boy's side. What a shame. A shame and a scandal. They agreed. In 1941, the PHS circulated a list of subjects' names to the draft board, instructing military physicians not to treat any men who were inducted. When the United States entered World War II, Tuskegee syphilis study subjects were exempted from the draft because the PHS feared that they would be treated for syphilis in the military. Wow. Wow. In the early 1940s, some study participants made their way to the PHS's fast track VD treatment clinics, which were uh, vicar- oh my gosh, that's why I need my phone because I don't know how to say this. Let me get my phone so I could say it out loud for y'all. Hold on. Thank you for joining me. Please um hit the like when you come in. Please make sure you subscribe. Check out the other videos. I got some good content. So I hear usually my real shit got the little views. My not ratchet videos, because I always try to make sure we learn something from it. But those are the ones that get 10, 20,000 views. I'm currently being shadow banned. I'm asking all my Care Bears to help me with the algorithm so we can kick its ass. Okay? And while that's loading, I need to look up this word. And I know it, but I'm just struggling because I've been reading all day at work. So let's get this. How do you pronounce this? Here we go. Vociferously in a loud and forceful manner. Girl, you knew that word. How you gonna take the bookmark off and lose your place? Oh, I'm tired. Please forgive me. Hold on. Vociferously. We was past that. Oh, here it is. Boom. Okay. Were vociferously dedicated to the eradication of syphilis, but a list of their names had preceded them, and most were physically removed. When penicillin proved an effective and safe cure for syphilis in 1943, a vigorous national program of treatment ensued, and some, oh wow, do you see how they plot on folks? Do you see that? In some determined subjects did succeed in circumventing the government dragnet to obtain treatment. 30 men, 7 to 5% of the infected study participants managed to obtain the effective degree of treatment, prompting Vanderleer to worry that the treatment might interfere with the study data. Quote, I hope that the availability of antibiotics has not interfered too much with this project, he wrote to scientist Stanley H. Suckman early 1952. PHS doctors knew that this degree of treatment hopelessly polluted any data that they may salvage from the study. So they later put a fictitious spin on the numbers of participants who had received adequate treatment, bolstered by the oft repeated fiction that the blacks did not want or seek out medical care. Bitch, I am getting grouchy. Quote, these men still regard hospitals and medicine with suspicion and prefer an occasional dose of time-honored herbs or tonics to modern drugs. Okay, not even like they're referring to black folklore because the shit was actually true. They was actually doing this greasy, digging up our bodies for medical purposes, unbeknownst to us. Okay, doing secret ass experimentations on us, getting people hooked on drugs and shit so they can do what the fuck that they want to do, violating their dead bodies. Like, come on. I don't know. If this don't grind your gears, okay, I don't know what to tell you. As men began to die, the PHS performed autopsy and regularly published the results in medical journals, which we know they've been lying and making shit up. They done made up whole diseases in them books, okay? Check out chapter 2 and you'll see exactly what we already know, okay? They even shared study results at a 1936 American Medical Association meeting, which you can't barely trust them at all, which means many white physicians were informed of the study's details, but not African American physicians who were largely barred from the AMA membership in the first motherfucking place. And then not only that, they would pull them to the side, as we learned on the other page, and have them agree to not treating some of the patients who were known to have syphilis. The 1936 AMA report revealed that 84% of the infected subjects showed signs of illness. A decade later, the death rate of the infected men was twice that of the control subjects, prompting Wenger to boast smugly in 1950, quote, we now know where we could only surmise before that we have contributed to their ailments and shortened their lives. And he's just like, that's what we did, bitch. By 1955, nearly one-third of the autopsy men died directly of syphilis, and many of the survivors were suffering its deadliest complication. 40 wives were infected, and at least 19 children were born with syphilitic birth defects. In 1958, the PHS awarded a certificate of appreciation signed by the Surgeon General and replete with a gold seal to each infected man, along with $25, $1 for each year of the study, I would have had to whip somebody's ass. I would have had to whip somebody's ass. I would have had to whip somebody's ass. Did you just hear what the fuck I just said? In 1958, they awarded a certificate, a piece of paper with fancy writing on it, showing their appreciation, signed by the fraudulent surgeon ass general with a gold seal on it, though, right? To to every man that was affected with $25. I gotta know. How much was $25 worth in 1958?
Here's a summary from Inflation Calculator. $25 in 1958 is equivalent in purchasing power to about $226.28 today.
$226 is what they got for being infected with a disease and dying from the symptoms of it. Bitch, they partners dying in the whole nine. Okay, you know what? Somebody needs to get their ass whooped. Okay, so we on to the next part. A magic bullet withheld. Imagine the global jubilation that would greet the announcement of a simple injection to cure AIDS. I think I might do one. I'm not going to promise y'all, but we might have a movie night. Okay, this kind of exuberance accompanied the discovery of penicillin, a magic bullet, which scientists believe they would finally tame syphilis, a plague with which medicine had wrestled for centuries. In 1943, the PHS's network of clinics triumphantly dispensed penicillin nationally, to the deep satisfaction of Surgeon General Thomas Perrin, who had adopted syphilis eradication as a personal and professional crusade. In his 1937 book, Shadow on the Land, Perrin had bemoaned the high rates of syphilis in Black and poor population, and now he could lay claim to having orchestrated its demise. But even Perrin, when presented with this antibiotic, Holy Grail, opt for continued experimentation with the Black men of Macon County. He explained that the availability of penicillin meant the opportunity represented by the Tuskegee syphilis studies pool of syphilitic patients would never come again and must be exploited. So, I'm just saying, y'all, that evil shit is in their blood. I don't give a fuck. They are evil. They are evil. They are pure evil. Who does that? Like, who the fuck does that? Knowing good and damn well it's going to cause problems for somebody. 33 years after the study began, social changes eclipsed the moral question posed by penicillin, a question that the PHS had demised or dismissed so blithely. The nation that had passively accepted medical apartheid and sharecropper slavery in 1932 was racked by constant ethnic tension and racial warfare by the 1960s. Deadly racial repression with dogs, guns, lynchings, and bombings reigned in the defiant South and in the North. Murderous street brawls erupted over voting rights, school desegregation, which I wish nothing, desegregation, de facto segregation, and conflicts with police, which we still got today. National Guard troops enforced integration as urban riots consumed northern and southern cities alike in blood and in fire. Okay, I just gotta get off my gram and close this one time. Close, fool. There we go. But these events were, I don't know that word, y'all. Let's figure it out together. Hold on, this is why we needed my phone. As long as you keep your head to the sky, you can win. Okay, I found it.
Tangential.
Okay, tangential. Relating to or along tangent. Diverging from a previous course or line. Erratic. Hardly touching a matter. Peripheral. Oh, okay. Okay, so where was we at? How did she say it?
Tangential.
Tangential. Okay. But these events were tangential to the shabby, tightly circumscribed lives of the weary, destitute sharecroppers in the rural study, whose median age was now 74. They were enfeebled beyond their years by poverty, prostrating labor, and syphilis, and the PHS physicians were deeply concerned because 3 men had already been lost to autopsy when they died without the researchers learning of it in the time to obtain the bodies. In order to assure the needed autopsies, it was essential for the PHS to track closely the aged men's serious illnesses and hospitalizations, any one of which could end in death. However, Eunice Rivers was aging too and becoming too old to track them. She was given the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare's highest honor, the Oveda Gulp Hobby Award for 25 years, during which, through selfless devotion and skillful human relations, she was sustained through she was sustained she has sustained the interest and cooperation of the subjects of venereal disease and control program in Macon, Alabama, then retired. Okay, so she got another little certificate of 25 years of service, of being a whole traitor to your own people. And you knew good and goddamn well that what they was doing to those black men, knowing that they had wives and kids, and your retarded ass done sat up there for 25 years assisting them racist, heartless, ruthless, cold-hearted, maniacal weirdos. Girl, ain't nobody got time for you and your butter biscuits, bitch. Shout out to Fine Nubian Queen. I'm a fan, but they don't fuck with me. You feel me? The black nurse, I think I'm a little too trill for that, who replaced her was told to be sure to visit any seriously ill or hospitalized men frequently. Suddenly, in 1965, the nation's civil rights drama played out in the medical sphere as the PHS found its ethics assailed from many directions. The radical leftist group stood for a democratic society, discovered the Tuskegee syphilis study, and held rallies urging that it be ended, but they were easily dismissed as a fringe group given to counterculture hyperbole. However, the question of racism in the study also surfaced within the medical fold, as Alan Brandt discovered I'm sorry, y'all, when he found the minutes of when he discovered the minutes of a 1965 meeting at the Centers for Disease Disease Control, the CDC. Now we know the CDC be playing games. We could go to the CDC about the current events, and you could expose yourself to what the fuck is really going on, and maybe you might change some of the things that you do day to day. I'm just saying, I would watch that live that I posted up if I was you. It got like one view. but it got game. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. An excerpt is illuminating. Quote, racial issue was mentioned briefly. Will not affect the study. Any questions can be handled by saying that these people were at a point that therapy would no longer help them. But okay, they are getting better medical care than they would under any other circumstances. End of quote. Okay, didn't we read on that other page how they falsely advertise this treatment about bad blood? So they're sitting up here whole lying. Do you see that shit? That's why you got to look into history to find the truth. I'm just saying, and they still pulling the same shit today. And look what they did with Dr. Fauci and them. Now black folks suddenly, now if you don't think this ain't no other play on us, you is a fool with pre-existing conditions. If you black, fat, overweight, eat pork rinds for breakfast and Doritos and Pepsi first thing in the morning, then I'm positive that you got high blood pressure. Let me put this on the charger, y'all, because I need this after we done. I promise you, you got high blood pressure. I swear to God, you got it. I know you got it. Hypertension, all that shit. But you got to have your pork rind. You got to have your fried chicken, though, right? We got to get away from them slave plates. Okay. We got to get away from them slave plates and the European diets. Period. As well as I do, you know, as well as I do. I got work to do too. So I ain't just getting at you, but I'm just saying, you know what I'm saying? CDC, they're on. Like they just straight potted on them. The same year, white physician Dr. Irwin Schatz of the Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit wrote the PHS after reading a medical paper on the Tuskegee syphilis study in the Archives of Internal Medicine. His letter began, I am utterly astounded by the fact that physicians allow patients with a potentially fatal disease to remain untreated when effective therapy is available. His letter was never answered. Wow. By the year's end, the study was dealt that would eventually prove a fatal blow by Peter Buxton, a young Polish immigrant who worked as a venereal disease interviewer for the PHS. He learned of the study and immediately risked his job by writing his superiors to ask that it be stopped. A handful of PHS physicians responded by holding meetings at which they lectured Buxton on scientific merits of their work. Scientific, though? Is it really, though? Scientific merits of their work and decided to continue the study. Wow, in 1967, okay, my mom was 6 years old at this point, okay? Buxton left the agency to attend law school, but he occasionally wrote the PHS to renew his complaints, but to no avail. By 1969, physical examinations, autopsies reveal as many as 100 of the men had died of syphilis and its complications, and others had died of heart disease that researchers ascribed to syphilis. In 1972, okay, Buxton, exasperated by 7 years of PHS inaction, told a journalist friend about the study. On July 25th of that year, Jean Heller broke the story for the Associated Press. Good for you, girl. Shocked, PHS officials denied any knowledge of human rights abuses. However, they also deftly defended their work by explaining how the syphilis treatment available in 1933, um, arsphenamide, would have been worthless and possibly too dangerous to give the men. They added that treating the men now will risk their health. Oh, so you care now. None of these claims was true. Arsphenamide have been standard of care when the study began in treating men, now would imperil only the study's data. Okay, but didn't they determine that that was infectual though? Infectual? Wasn't they just giving them like iron pills and little aspirins and shit? And they was all wooed by it because they do back-breaking labor all goddamn day. I'm sure they head, toes, knees, and shoulders was hurting, okay? And head, shoulders, knees, and toes, all that hurting. You get them a couple of aspirin, they finally get a bit of relief. Of course, they feeling wooed by the doctors. Doctors. The news media, physicians, politicians, and ordinary citizens, black and white, expressed horrified anger and demanded an explanation from the government and some sort of assurance that such cruelty would never again be sanctioned by the PHS. The government promised to conduct an internal review, but when it became evident that this would neither mollify the press or appease public outrage, Senator Ted Kennedy held hearings in a Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, HEW, Health Welfare official, Assistant Secretary for Health and Scientific Affairs, Merlin K. Duvall, MD, announced, damn, that's a big ass title, announced an investigation on August 24, 1972. Damn, this is about when my dad graduated goddamn high school. Duvall appointed the 9-member panel of esteemed professionals whose dissection of the study quickly degenerated into inefficiency, shouting matches, political infighting, accusations of a government cover-up, and the appalling destruction of key evidence. A grimly self-destructive brawl that has never before been made public. Wow. So she's putting this on to what was going down. Okay, this next part is called Cover Up, the ad hoc panel. Because the government appointed ad hoc panel to the Tuskegee syphilis study, did indeed end the study and also provided the impetus for important new laws that still regulate U.S. human medical experimentation. It is widely assumed to have done its job, but interviews I conducted with its surviving members suggest that the ad hoc panel also suffered miserable failures. The group of academic political, oh, that's what that means. Okay. The group of academic, political, and economic leaders was chaired by Dillard University President Brodus Butler, his name, PhD, an illustrious educator and Tuskegee Airman. The other members included J. Katz, MD, a Yale University psychiatrist and professor of law, Ron Brown, the general counsel of the National Urban League and future U.S. Secretary of Commerce, and Vernal Cave, MD, director of the Bureau of Venereal Disease Control for the New York City Health Department. After sanctioning the most lengthy instance of experimental abuse in Western history, Secretary Duvall, I'm sorry, y'all, petulantly cast himself in the role of a masochist victim, declaring, quote, I want a panel that would be sympathetic to the public point of view rather than to the scientific or factual point of view. So I loaded it with angry blacks. That way there could be no criticism, end quote. The panel was not, quote, loaded with blacks. 5 members were black, including Chairman Butler, Vernal Cave, and Ron Brown, and 4 were white, including Jay Katz. Although nearly all the panel members expressed deep anger as they learned details of the study, they were also seasoned thinkers familiar with ethics, medical issues, and are both. Because the Black panelists included physicians, scientists, lawyers, and university president, they presumably were able to grasp the scientific university president. They um wait. They presumably were able to grasp the scientific point of view, but the panel had no historian. You need the historian, man, flat out. The panelists' clamor for the truth was muted by the narrowness of the charge Duvall gave them. The committee was to determine whether the study was justified in 1932 and whether it should have been continued when penicillin became available. To recommend whether the study should be continued at this point in time, and if not, how it should be determined. I'm sorry, I'm losing my place, y'all. How it should be terminated in a way consistent with the rights and health needs of its remaining participants. And finally, to determine whether existing policies to protect the rights of patients participating in health research conducted or supported by the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare are adequate and effective to recommend improvements in these policies if needed. It should include federally mandated, state mandated, you know what I'm saying? Research experiments. They should include that. I feel like we need to include that now, considering what's going on nowadays, because it's almost like they're forcing us to release our medical records in regards to the vaccine. Okay. The second charge was the easiest. The panelists decided that the study should be terminated immediately and that the men and their families should be given medical care and contemporary uh, compensa- compensatory compensatory funds. On the first charge, the panel determined that the study was ethically unjustified both when it was initiated and after the discovery that penicillin was safe and effective treatment that might have saved the lives of the health of the subjects. On the third charge, the panel determined that there were inadequate provisions regarding the protection of human subjects of research. It mandated that a formal department of instituted for regulation of human subjects research, a national human subjects investigation board. However, the panel's charge excluded some of the most important ethical questions, skirting the critical use, I mean, skirting the critical issue of the initial 1932 decisions to withhold the treatment in the form of bismuth and therapeutic dosages of ars- arsphen- arsphenamide even before penicillin became available. These were imperfect medications, but they were the standard of care in the 1930s. The standard, but they really knew otherwise. Even though they're claiming it was the standard, it absolutely was not. Panel member Fred Speaker, a lawyer, complained, I thought at the beginning they were asked to do something by these people that was inappropriate. The scope we were given was too limited, in the quote. The panel also had far too little time, just 12 meetings over 7 months to analyze a 40-year experiment. That's fucked up. We asked for the extension, says Katz, and they begrudgingly gave us. Many of us felt that it was impossible to complete the work in that time. When we asked for another extension, it was denied. Them bitches is some grimy motherfuckers. The committee's report, like, why is it so hard for motherfuckers to just keep it a buck, though? The committee's report determined that the men may have submitted voluntarily, but that this did not constitute informed consent. However, the panel addressed the wrong ethical question. The pertinent issue was not whether the men had been duly informed of the experiment's danger, but that the men had never been informed that they were in an experiment at all. They thought they were only receiving treatment, yet the committee seemed not to understand this because they're fucking boneheads. They're intentional fucking boneheads, and then they go back to their little offices and drink their fucking whiskey and talk about how they do the black folk. Why not? Some members pointed to the panel chairperson, Dr. Brodus Butler, insisting that he had been charged with engineering a government whitewash, and this suspicion generated friction from the very first meeting. In 1994, Dr. Vernal Cave said, he spent the whole meeting telling us about how important it was to keep an open mind, to not look at the facts and not jump to conclusions. He said how important it was not to have an opinion until all information was in. As a result, most of the meeting was spent on that, getting lectured. No one else had anything to say. Then it turned out that he was the only one that came there with a closed mind. Look at that. Dr. Katz agrees. I believe that for whatever reason, Butler was beholden to the HEW at the time. I don't know what his relationship was to them prior to this appointment as chair. He insisted he's probably with the eugenics. He's probably with them those weirdos. He insisted that our charge was more limited than the interpretations of some of us gave to our mission. He constantly slowed down He constantly slowed us down and forced us to go through maneuvers to get him to do certain things he thought were beyond the mandate given to us. Fred Speaker adds, as things developed, I just we couldn't let it go on. Butler, I think, wanted to keep things status quo. He was not the kind of guy to make demands on the administration or to say things that would embarrass the administration. For example, Speaker recalls at some point when we learned although we had been given instructions to stop the experiment, HEW had not done anything yet, and the experiment was still being conducted. That's when we all had our mini revolt. What I remember saying is, stop fucking around, let's do something. Butler had a serious discussion with future U.S. Commerce Secretary Brown, who was very forceful. Ron Brown was a hell of a guy. He deserves a great deal of credit. I'm sure four of us. I'm sure the four of us on the committee forced HEU to stop it immediately, Katz added. By October and November, it's become clear that we had challenged the chairman as a group and not accept how we wanted to proceed. An alliance formed between me and Renald Cave, and we were quickly joined by Fred Speaker and by Princeton theologian Dr. Seward Hiltner, who had knowledge about the problems of human experimentation. Rob Brown was chair of the Urban League. He was involved in national affairs and reluctant to get involved in what would soon become a controversial study. He was concerned about how it would affect his future position in government, but he was on our side. He, that's over. We could not count. We could count on him. Not everyone blames Dr. Butler for the group's failures. One panel member who spoke on the condition of anonymity said, I think that there was a great deal of guilt and frustration about the members' inability to do what they felt they were there to do. To some extent, Butler's became a focus for that frustration. Another panel member, late Dr. Jean Lewis Harris, denied perceiving any friction between Dr. Butler and his colleagues until final report was submitted, when we all became very angry. In the end, the panel wrote a strongly worded report that was critical of the government and the PHS. However, all the interview panel members agreed that Butler refused to sign it or even chair the meeting at which it was discussed. The surviving panelists say that they felt it critically important to present a unanimous report, so they argued long and bitterly until, at Butler's urging, they adopted a softer version whose language was less critical. Among other changes, the less confrontational new version deleted references to intentional racism and removed complaints that the panelists were afforded insufficient time and resources to thoroughly investigate the study's issues. Oh my God, that is so wrong on so many levels. So because they gotta quiet down the noise. They gotta. When the panelists received their copies of the final report in the mail, however, they were stunned by its cover letter, which read, "The final report of the Tuskegee Syphilis Study Ad Hoc Advisory Board is transmitted herewith. The chairman specifically abstains from concurrence in this final report, but recognizes his responsibility to submit it." What, bitch? Butler had induced them to water down the report, they say, then distanced himself from it. In late December 1995, Dr. Butler agreed to discuss the ad hoc panel with me, but tragically he fell ill shortly thereafter and died before we could do so. He almost certainly would have given a very different account of his role and of the group's dynamics, and his passing leaves a vacuum in this history that no one else's can fill. This part is called conspiracy theory. Y'all, I'm trying to keep it pushing through, y'all. I really am. This is kind of, horror and stuff. Girl, I'm ready to be done with this chapter. It's making me grouchy. Like, because these are some lying ass bitches, and I just feel like I don't think I would have been able to keep my composure. Because you're not just gonna motherfucking lie on me, bitch. Okay, constantly so. So this next part is called conspiracy theory. Duvall spoke of censure at the hands of angry blacks, but perhaps he should have worried about angry doctors instead. Most of the panelists believed that the government had hobbled their panel to preclude any real expression of outrage. However, the most painful revelation was yet to come. After the panel issued its report, Alan Brandt, who was who was then still a Columbia University graduate student, tracked down boxes of documents in the National Archives that fleshed out the full history and rationale of the Tuskegee syphilis study. I'm not calling this conspiracy theory. I'm calling this when the truth came out. Upon reading these, he realized that the panel had completely misunderstood the study's nature. He then wrote a paper clearly tracing the study's history, criticizing the panel for having failed to obtain the historical information necessary to judge the study for what it was: experimental exploitation of the unwitting. Brandt's work made it painfully clear, says Katz, that the panel had been sabotaged by the government staff they relied upon for information. It was the first time I heard about the documents. We had asked the staff repeatedly to find these documents, and they always came up empty handed. Allen discovered the documents in the National Archives. I felt very foolish, and I'm sure my fellow committee members felt foolish for not having known about the National Archives repository for documents of this kind. Wow, okay. My speculation is that several staff members must have known about the National Archives and should have looked there. They, HEW, minimized what emerged later, particularly the deceptive aspects of the study. I wrote a letter of complaint to Senator Kennedy and said I thought there was a cover up. I urged him to investigate. Kennedy's office determined that there had been no cover up, but Katz disagreed, and he was determined to enlist the panelists' help in demanding that the government admit how it sabotaged their investigation. He says, with the exception of Vern Cave, I didn't get a response from anyone. All of them had guilt feelings, including myself, that we hadn't done enough. I felt guilty I'd let academic work and family life and other considerations influence me to do less. The remorse may be appropriate, but so much was destroyed against the panel. The to oh my God, how do I say that word? The not so close charges, okay? The failure to include a historian in the investigation of medical abuse that spanned 4 decades, the likely withholding of key documents, the impossibly short time frame, and possibly the manipulations of government sympathizers all ensured that truth would be the first casualty of the Tuskegee syphilis study investigation. However, the panel engaged in a cover up of its own. Cave recalled, we went there to Tuskegee. We interviewed the victims, Nurse Rivers, the sociologist, everyone. We had them all on tape. When we got back the next morning, Brodus Butler said the first item on the agenda is whether we should keep the tape. I was amazed that others were amazed, and we spent the whole sessions talking about the tape. I'm going to confess that during the session, I thought of the fact that Nurse Rivers was an innocent person in this whole thing. In a moment of weakness, I said to myself, it would have been a shame to have this woman put in court, put on the stand, and pilloried. She was an innocent victim, so I went along with destroying the tape. Never. How I don't feel like she was innocent. I just don't. Because early on, they revealed that she was aware of what was going on. So, how is she innocent suddenly? It was a terrible thing, Kat sadly muses. He, the chair, Dr. Brodus Butler, made the recommendation. He said it was to protect Rivers, and I unfortunately went along with it. I wish I hadn't done so. I wish I had been more alert to make the tape under seal, not to destroy it. We hadn't done our job well. Mm. The group burned the tape, and with it were lost first person accounts from scientists and staffers who are now dead. Oh my God. Oh my God. Hey girl, what's going on? I'm glad you're here, girl. They coming in and out, girl. We talking about syphilis. I feel them. Chapter 7, chapter 5, chapter 2 and 3 are real hard. Um, they burned the tape and were first president who were all now dead. Moreover, in trying to protect the reputation of Eunice Rivers, but she's been exposed this year. The panel may have damned it by robbing her of her voice. This was a shocking act for which I found no parallel in contemporary committees, and had there been a historian on the panel, it would not have taken place. After the panel's recommendation ended the study in 1972, its participants and their families have been given had began to receive medical treatment. Macon County Attorney Fred Gray filed a 1.8 billion class action civil lawsuit on July 23, 1973, which named as defendants HEW and PHS and the CDC, the state of Alabama, and the Millbank Fund, as well as several individual PSH officers, a few John Does to cover any unknown malfactors. The suit resulted in a 1974 out-of-court settlement for more than 10 million. It yielded a mere 37,000 for each living study participant, 15,000 for its heirs, and nearly 1 million in legal fees for Gray, which was deducted from the payments made to the men. Wow, the living control group members received even less. Black anti-heroes in white. The Tuskegee syphilis study compromised the reputations not only of white but also of many black caregivers by alerting the nation to to the possibility that they were directly responsible for this notorious medical abuse of Black patients. I mean, but the roles of some key African Americans in the study have been exaggerated. In 1995, Dr. Henry Foster's nomination as Surgeon General was derailed by accusation, which he denies, that he attended a meeting where the Tuskegee syphilis study was discussed, and the resultant media uproar castigated Foster for failing to denounce or to end the study. The study. Foster denied knowing anything about the study before the news media exposed it in 1972, even though no one could demonstrate that he had been present. The very accusation was enough to end his hopes for appointment. By contrast, no news accounts have been um, censored or even identified the scores of white American Medical Association members at a 1965 meeting where the Tuskegee syphilis study was reported upon a great detail. For that matter, the PHS physicians responsible for the study have never been charged or punished. But they real quick, especially if you're running for government, to put that Black dude up there, okay? Eunice Rivers, a modestly educated Black nurse in the profoundly segregated rural Alabama of the 1940s, occupied the lowest rung in the medical hierarchy. Hers was an era when a nurse was a handmaiden trained to assist, not question, the physician, and a Black nurse occupied an even lower professional stratum than a white one. Yet Rivers came to shoulder with the burden of America's most infamous instance of medical research abuse. She has been accused of retaining men in an experiment that she knew could only harm them. But all her spontaneous statements focused proudly upon the care and protection that she provided them. She categorically denied ever seeking out and removing subjects from syphilis clinics, and she has been accused of doing by her superiors. The doctors who engineered and controlled the study in 1955, Rivers, whose role was that of a caretaker and tracker, not of research analyst, was listed in the coveted position of first author of a public health report paper defending the study. Oh, wow. So they used this Black woman as the face of the study. Was this an earned scientific laurel or a cynical ploy to portray the study as one plan and analyzed by a racially mixed group of researchers rather than a group of white male scientists? Her role in her own statement suggests the latter. When she was first recruited to enter the study as scientific assistant, her response had been, "You know, I don't know a thing about it." And this was likely frankness, not false modesty. As a night nurse at the Andrew Hospital, she had little scientific training. Her forte was caring for people. When she is asked about the study details, Rivers' responses are um, um, Rivers' responses echoes the camp with which the PHS researchers have agreed to defend themselves, which suggests that Rivers never understood the science behind the study. Her crime was believing the PHS doctors who told her that theirs was beneficent work. However, I cannot completely excuse her, me neither, as much as I long to. I wish she had asked more questions, and once the question of whether the study was ethical had been openly raised in 1965, I wish she had demanded reassurance on the point or left the study. Instead, she compounded her error by her continued blind faith in the researchers she had been trained to serve. She failed to see that she had been used as a Judas goat to lure the men into completing their research roles and as a shield to deflect charges of racism. But how do these pallid failings of omission compare to the sinister machinations of PHS officials who deliberately lied, plotted, abused, and deflected blame onto the powerless? Perhaps we should ask ourselves why the name Nurse Rivers is so closely associated with the Tuskegee syphilis study, but the names of Telfero Clark, Thomas Murrell, and Raymond Vandelier and Oliver C. Wanger remain all but unknown. Ooh, doggy ear this one, just like page 137. As a point of reference, in case you got to get somebody together and why you don't, anyway. Although at least four full-length books, two feature films, a handful of documentaries, plays, and hundreds of medical newspaper and magazine articles have been written about the Tuskegee syphilis study. There are still aspects of the study about which we know little. For example, the interpretations of the study have focused upon the monitoring of the disease's course in the untreated Black man, but Benjamin Roy, MD, in Atlanta, oh my God, psychoneuroimmunologist, has proposed another experimental agenda for the Tuskegee study. More than a decade ago, Roy discussed that PHS scientists may have used the men to develop a reliable syphilis test and vaccine. The unwitting subjects may have served American laboratories as a reservoir of T. pallidum bacterium. They were human incubators of the bacterium that causes syphilis. Oh, wow. In 1995, Harvard Journal study of minority public health article by Roy proposes that the experiment's chief medical importance was in providing a reservoir of infected men who could be used to develop new, more reliable, and profitable tests for syphilis. Roy points out that the Public Health Service's study of the men at the Tuskegee was only one of a related group research studies called cooperative clinical groups. The Tuskegee syphilis study began in 1932, 20 years before scientists learned to culture cells in which to grow pathogens such as syphilis bacterium. Thus, the development of a sensitive specific test for syphilis required a constant supply of syphilis, which could not be cultured in the laboratory. This constant need for fresh supplies of blood products that contain syphilis bacterium explains, among other things, why the studies were routinely administered spinal taps and had their blood drawn regularly. Okay. PHS documents verify that sera of the infected, which is tissue, Tuskegee subjects was used to develop more reliable tests for syphilis, including the fluorescent treponemal antibody absorption test, FTA-ABS test, and the Venereal Disease Research Laboratory test. In 1970, Dr. James B. Lucas of PHS's Venereal Disease branch conceded probably the greatest contribution that the Tuskegee study has made and can continue to provide has been documented sera for the study in our laboratory. In a great measure, the development of our endorsement of the FDA ABS test rested on the Tuskegee sera. The tests were marked globally and became quite profitable for the U.S. government because its contract with Alabama's Department of Health specified that any invention arising from the Tuskegee syphilis study will become the sole propriety of the United States. So instead of sitting there with your greedy motherfucking ass just giving them $37,000, meanwhile y'all making billions and gazillion dollars over decades and decades and decades, y'all could have gave them more money than that and also their children. Oh, I'm sorry, y'all. On the strength that you been knew that there was a cure for this shit. Among the ruins left in the wake of the Tuskegee syphilis study were the blighted lives and early deaths of hundreds of subjects and their families. But this was only the beginning. The proud good name of our nation's premier African American research institution has been forever besmirched. Um, the residual faith in medical science to which communities of disadvantaged Black people clung clung has been blasted so fiercely that physicians and researchers are still dodging the fallout. The health of 30 million African Americans is continually in peril, partly because many eschew effective care rather than risk the tender mercies of government sponsored medicine. Although many studies and abuses contributed to this uh, iotrophobia, Tuskegee remains the iconic symbol of rad- racialized medical abuse. But what about um, the other lady? Oh, I forgot her name. What about all the ladies that we mentioned in this book? Don't they count for something too? What about Dr. Miriam's nasty ass? What about him? Abuse. Okay. The study also left a rich mythical legacy that reveals much about the cultural consequences of the study. But it is essential to separate fact from fiction because the false beliefs generate false fears and accelerate Black aversion to medical treatment. I mean, I feel like we need to go back to our great granny's times and start doing what they was doing. Fuck those weirdos. Because ain't no telling what they doing now, especially nowadays. Why they trying to blame this new shit on us? First, it was a global thing. Now it's relegated to Black folks with pre-existing conditions. And as we've seen by the nurses and doctors, they're labeling people who haven't really actually died from that made up shit. Um, they're labeling every illness. Have you noticed there's no flu cases? No regular ass flu? What happened to regular ass pneumonia? I don't know. Perhaps the most persistent myth holds that the PHS actively injected the subjects with syphilis. This falsehood emanated not from overheated African American imaginations, but from the congressional record and erroneous newspaper accounts. Furthermore, this was an erroneous but not unrealistic belief because, as historian Susan E. Letter reminds us, researchers have injected Americans with gonorrhea, syphilis, and other venereal diseases on at least 40 occasions since 1892, most of which took place in the 20th century. In 1892, Albert Neisser intentionally affected a woman with syphilis by injecting them with a serum from syphilitic patients. Groups consisting only of African Americans have been injected with diseases such as granuloma, I'm sorry, granuloma inguinale, and malaria. J.A. McIntosh of Memphis, Tennessee, boasted in 1926 that he achieved the first instance of successfully experimental transmission of granuloma inguinale from one individual to another, a Black man who was, quote, not previously exposed in any way to the possibility of spontaneously contracting the disease, end quote. Another popular myth holds that studies infected men were soldiers or were Tuskegee Airmen, which seems a simple, erroneous association of the Tuskegee Airmen with Tuskegee Institute. This myth was reinforced when actor Lawrence Fishburne played the lead role in both Miss Evers' Boys, the irresponsibly fictionalized HBO feature based upon the Tuskegee syphilis study, and the television film The Tuskegee Airmen. Yet this myth also reflects a sad acknowledgement that the honor of Tuskegee University, a proud, excuse me, y'all, a proud scientific bastion once celebrated as the Black Harvard, also fell victim to this shameful perversion of medical research. I mean, it kind of is what it is. Don't no black folks want to fuck with no shit like that because they feel like they gonna get got next. Still, it is a mistake to attribute African Americans' medical reluctance to simple fear generated by the Tuskegee syphilis study, because this study is not an aberration that single-handedly transformed African American perceptions of the healthcare system. The study is part of a pattern of experimental abuse, and many African Americans understand it as such. Because a rich oral tradition has sustained remembrances of painful abuse and humiliation at the hands of physicians, we should remember that Vanessa Northington Gamble, MD, director of the Tuskegee University's National Center for Bioethics and Research in Healthcare, averred many Africans feared and distrust Western medicine who have never heard of Tuskegee. That part. In 2004, Stephen Sodecki, assistant director of the Tuskegee Bioethics Center, remarked, one of the huge challenges we have in recruitment of African Americans into clinical trials and the Tuskegee syphilis study is always cited as one of the reasons why African Americans are reluctant to participate. Boom, I feel them. Too many researchers and social scientists still attribute all of African Americans' fears of medical abuse to the Tuskegee syphilis study. Their surveys often frame questions that are limited to this one study. News accounts follow suit, usually attributing all Black iotrophobia to Tuskegee. Consider the newspaper journal expert. But I mean, shit, I'm still stuck on what's her name? What's her name? Poor thing. What's her name, man? And old dude too. Bessie, wasn't it? I'm still stuck on her. Maybe I need to memorize that name. Okay, so here's an excerpt from the journal. Congress is poised to consider ill-advised legislation introduced by Representative Gary Ackerman of New York that would bar the blind HIV testing of blood samples taken from newborns, writes Ronald Bayer in the Washington Post. According to Bayer, the specter of the Tuskegee syphilis study, the federal experiment that traced the course of the disease in African American men who were not informed they had a treatable sexually transmitted disease, surrounds the debate. Um, and this is from the Village Voice in 1996. Dr. Arthur Amen, a specialist in pediatric AIDS, compared the anonymous testing of infants in New York to the Tuskegee experiment, in which Black men with syphilis were observed but not treated in the government study. Oh, here's another one from the New York Times in 1997. The impact of the Tuskegee study, in which Blacks in the South were not treated for syphilis as part of a government study, continues to be felt as the mistrust in generated interferes with attempts to combat AIDS in certain Black areas. AIDS education programs in Black communities have often prompted the topic of Tuskegee because it is okay. But here's another one from the Washington Post in April of 1997. Oh, this is just a couple days. This is another article written in that same month. Okay. The Tuskegee syphilis study ended a quarter of a century ago, but its effects still can be felt. Many African Americans distrust in today's medical establishment can be attributed to Tuskegee, says Dr. Carl C. Bell, Executive Director of Chicago's Community Mental Health Council. I mean, listen, they got every reason to think that because, y'all need to watch House of Numbers. Watch the House of Numbers. I'm just saying, watch the House of Numbers if it's still on there. The assumed one-to-one correspondence between this study and Black distrust is chronicled in hundreds of articles with headlines such as "The Ghost of Tuskegee," "Close Up," "Tuskegee's Experiment's Legacy is the Spread of Suspicions." Here's another one: "Sour Legacy of Tuskegee Syphilis Study Lingers." And another one: "Tuskegee Experiment's Legacy." Oh my God. But it's important to look beyond this one study and examine African Americans' aversion to the healthcare system. By focusing upon a single event of the Tuskegee syphilis study rather than examining a centuries old pattern of experimental abuse. Okay, can we say that together? Together? Centuries old pattern of experimental abuse. Okay. Recent investigations tend to distort the problem, casting African Americans' wariness as an overreaction to a single event rather than an understandable, reasonable reaction to the persistent experimental abuse that has characterized American medicine's interaction with African Americans. As early as 1997, a few perceptive biomedical researchers placed Black iatrophobia in the context of a longer history of research, abuse, and neglect. That year, Emory University's Otis Brawley, MD, told the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education that many researchers believed that because of Tuskegee, it would be so difficult and even impossible to recruit Blacks that we shouldn't waste our time. But researchers used Tuskegee as an excuse for laziness. Fortunately, more investigations with fewer leading questions are now being launched, and they will allow us to learn more about the extent of African Americans' awareness concerning the long, unhappy history of the medicalized abuse and experimentation. The Tuskegee syphilis study is the longest and the most infamous, but hardly the worst, experimental abuse of African Americans. It has been eclipsed in both numbers and egregiousness egregiousness by other abusive medical studies. And the balance of this book tells these stories. Subsequent chapters will relate how, after the Tuskegee syphilis study, African Americans' illnesses were not simply observed, but they were also induced when subjects were administered toxic substances are deliberately exposed to a wide range of biological hazards, including lethal radiation doses, hazardous experimental technologies, a wide range of untested chemical products, risky non-therapeutic vaccines, and injection with infectious agents. In fact, in the late 1920s and 30s, the very period when the Tuskegee syphilis study lost its therapeutic arm and mutated into exploitation, an experiment in malaria therapy conducted under the auspices auspice of the Rockefeller Foundation. Boom, there we go. There's our culprit, was doing worse than allowing Black men with syphilis to die. Researchers were killing Black syphilitics outright in order to test the theory of treatment. In 1910, New York City was home to the only hospital in the nation that was devoted exclusively to research, the Rockefeller Institute. As mentioned earlier in this chapter, neurosyphilis or paresis occurs in late stage syphilis, affecting the nervous system and causing insanity. In 1910, it was long thought to be a mental ailment, not an infectious one. Dr. Mark Boyd, a researcher founded by the Rockefeller Institute, was testing a novel treatment for neurosyphilis, malaria therapy. Boyd deliberately infected both black and white people suffering from neurosyphilis with malaria in order to generate high fevers, which he hoped would kill the syphilis spiral shed. But the blacks in his experiment seemed to resist the infection by the relatively benign plas, plasmodium strain of malaria. So Boyd, I'm losing my places. I'm sorry. Boyd infected 470 of the syphilitic blacks, but no whites, with the deadly strain instead, or with the fal- falciparum strain instead, killing some of the black subjects. Boyd did not stop the experiments when blacks began dying. Instead, he resorted to deceit. In his notes, he disguised their causes of death and distorted the death rate of blacks to shroud the fact that they were dying from deliberate infection with phallus falciparum. Ooh, I'm struggling with that word. However, the decision not to treat the sick men of the Tuskegee study is a different crime, a crime of omission, and it illustrates several of the important patterns explored in this book. These include the selection of blacks for the riskiest studies, their disproportionate selection for non-therapeutic experimentation, the myth of medical distinctiveness, which held that syphilis was manifested differently in blacks, and the myth of hypersex blacks as incorrigible vectors of sexual disease and dysfunction. The use of men as reservoirs of syphilis reinforced the familiar use of black bodies to generate the profitable wonders of the new and clinical display of disease in the clinic and in medical journals. The defenses of the study all rest upon carefully engineered fictions. Its apologists have claimed that the study was merely a passive observation, a study in nature, but it was not because researchers actively designed it and lied to participants, promising treatment, but actively withholding it. The study cannot be defended on a utilitarian basis because PHS physicians admitted years before it was ended that it imparted no new clinical knowledge that would allow them to help future patients. By 1970, James Lucas, assistant chief of the PHS's venereal disease branch, concluded nothing learned will be nothing learned will prevent, find, or cure a single case of infectious syphilis or bring us closer to our basic mission of controlling venereal disease in the United States. The study did, however, generate publications, scientific tools, and scientific stature for the PHS researchers. PHS researchers lack scientific as well as ethical integrity. Early in the experiment, Raymond Vondeler had triumphantly announced that the clinical assessments provided proof of divergent white and syphilis, black syphilis. Black syphilitics, he said, clearly suffered primarily cardiovascular complications, whereas whites suffered neurological devastation. condition. But a 10-member blue ribbon panel of American Heart Association disagreed. In 1933, they condemned the data as inaccurately interpreted. The racial dysmorphism existed only in the PHS researchers' mind. Yet the experiment in racial comparison was continued as if this had never been determined. Wow. Some claim that the Tuskegee syphilis study was not a racist study because it it simply mirrored a parallel study of Norwegian whites by Dr. E. Brusgaard. In 1929, Brusgaard reviewed the chart of 2,000 Oslo area syphilis patients who, for various reasons, had not received medication between 1891 and 1910. However, equating the Tuskegee study with the Oslo study is inaccurate because the latter was a retrospective analysis of Norwegian treatment data that had already been collected, not an experiment in malign neglect designed deliberately to withhold treatment from the unwitting. Even in the PHS, Even if the PHS used a parallel design, it would be absurd to compare the racial dynamics driving Black and white health consumption in segregated Alabama to that of whites in a more racially um, I'm saying that wrong, homogenous social welfare state such as Norway. Apologists for the study often make the error of assuming that because there were no national laws governing human medical experimentation in the 1930s, there were no ethical strictures excuse me, upon what a physician could and could not do with his patients. But in the era of Tuskegee syphilis study, physicians were constrained by hospital regulations and American Medical Association codes to share diagnosis and request permission for experimentation and usually for treatment. The ethical norm of the time. There were also laws that forbade many of the PHS practices at Tuskegee. Among the examples given by historian Susan Letter in 1929, in the 1929 observation by lawyer George Weinman, that, quote, the unauthorized autopsy of a dead human body is a tort giving rise to a cause of action for damages, end quote. This norm was often violated in the case of African Americans. Okay. Okay, here goes the last part. Transforming the legacy. Okay, so now we had in recent times. I'm scared. I'm scared. What if my prediction is right and they start talking about the drive-bys? I don't know. I'm just guessing. I'm guessing. But I'm good at guessing too. We have the last part. Transforming the legacy. On May 16, 1997, a quarter of a century after Tuskegee syphilis study ended, President Bill Clinton, his government fucked me up. President William Jefferson Clinton formally apologized for the study in a dignified White House ceremony that allowed the mere 8 survivors and their families to join the activists and historians who had championed their cause. You want to know why? Because he was implementing the prison industrial complex. That's why. So he was getting us any kind of way. Hey, what's up, Andrea? Leisha's in the house. Shunda. That's why I shouted y'all out in the beginning. And Robo Bear. This is his quote. To the survivors, to the wives and family members, the children. Now, mind you, this is 1990 motherfucking 7. Okay. 1997, they finally get an apology. Okay. Oh, besides that little janky ass certificate they got. I say what you know. No power on earth can give you back the lives lost, the pain suffered, the years of internal torment and anguish. What was done cannot be undone. But what we can end is the silence. We can stop turning our heads away. We can look at you in the eyes and finally say, on behalf of the American people, what the United States government did was shameful, and I am sorry. To Macon County, to Tuskegee, to the doctors who have been wrongly associated with the events there, you have our apology as well. To our African American citizens, I'm sorry that your federal government orchestrated a study so clearly racist that can never be allowed to happen again. Meanwhile, well, that's cute, Bill, but I don't know. Clamorous applause greeted the president's acknowledgement of the racism and immorality of the study. Under the hot press lights, the survivors shared their remembrances and their hope that such an abuse would never be repeated. It is time, 94-year-old Herman Shaw declaimed, to put this horrible nightmare behind us as a nation. We must never allow a tragedy like the Tuskegee study to happen again. The apology incorporated a permanent, tangible legacy as well. The Tuskegee University National Center for Bioethics and Research in Healthcare, supported in part by $200,000 grant President Clinton and President Clinton allocated as a part of the apology. It opened May 12, 1998, with the stated goal of training and educating African Americans in bioethics. The center's multi-ethnic staff, of course, has forged scholarly partnerships with mainstream bioethics centers as other universities. Unlike other centers, however, Tuskegee has also invested heavily in community education. More than 30 years after its unmasking, the study still horribly fascinates. It, mm, it may be the study's essentially vacuous nature because it embodies coolly designed crimes of omission by featureless government martinets who illustrate Hannah Arendt's banality of evil to appalling perfection. Embodies a coolly designed crimes of omission by featureless government marionettes who illustrate Hannah's banality of evil to appalling a perfection. I don't know what that means. It must be a reference to some sort of like horror book or something like that. I don't know what that means. It's before my time, or perhaps it is medicine's portrayal by physicians of the public health service, the very government entities charged with protecting our health. Then again, it may have been the carefully orchestrated complicity of so many powerful, privileged, pow- privileged physicians utterly bent upon destroying the health of a group of poor, powerless, vulnerable Black men. Or the very longevity of the syphilis study may be what holds us in thrall. Discovering a murderously racist experiment that had been secretly coddled from the antebellum era to the Nixon administration is a bit like finding one of those gruesome prehistoric fish, long thought extinct, in the deep end of your swimming pool. Wow. The syphilis study, like those Jurassic holdovers, has forced us to confront a living, breathing monster that we would rather have co signed the history. Yet the Tuskegee syphilis study has not really ended because it continues to fascinate. The flows of books, plays, poems, songs, films continues as Americans probe and worry the experiment for lessons. I suspect we're partly motivated by our desire to extract some valuable meaning that will produce good as a counterweight to its evil. Maybe what is important is that blacks and whites are united in their outrage over this medical nightmare, and that whites actively attack this racist viper at the breast of medicine. A white whistleblower challenged the study, a white journalist forced it onto the national stage, and a white and black panel members joined to end it. But if we had learned what we should have, this book would stop here. The greatest tragedy of the study is that has failed to serve as many it has failed to serve as a cautionary tale for researchers. Its inception marked the dawn of many other experimental evils against blacks, detailed in the chapters to come. We're literally halfway through the book. We're literally halfway through. I'm so hyped for us. I went 10 minutes over because it was longer, but now we're in part 2 of the book because we read part 1, and all of this was part 1 because remember at the beginning of the book, chapters 1 through 7, which we just literally finished. Uh, this part is called A Troubling Tradition. Okay, now part 2 is called The Usual Suspects, and we're going to start tomorrow, chapter 8 in part 2, and this is called The Black Stork, the eugenic control of African American reproduction. And baby girl, I know all about this. I know about that. I know about that. I know all about that. I can't wait to learn about this, but I know a lot about that shit. I really do. I really do. I learned about it really young. Let me give you a little story. You know, I like to tell stories. Let me tell you, I had a pregnancy scare. Mind you, when I came to the Ville from California, so that's the medical apartheid, y'all. We doing this, okay? Um, I had a pregnancy scare. I think I was like 19. Um, so they was like, you could get free pregnancy tests now at the Planned Parenthood. You know what I'm saying? Which is a totally ironic ass name, right? And I went there, and this lady was talking to me about my options. She was damn near. I went in there like thinking, oh man, I'm about to have a baby, to which I was scared and kind of excited, to now considering abortion. And mind you, I was living in the burbs. I had to go all the way across town to the hood for this service. They didn't have nothing in our area, in that area, and they still don't to this day. As a matter of fact, with this city being the perfect example of how segregation is still very much active right now, they don't have those options. And if they do, they're far and few in between, but they're not advertised like they are out here. Now, they have recently, in the last, I'll say, when did I come back? In 2013. So I would say, when did she graduate high school? 2011. In the last 10 years, I have started to see um, different types of advertisements. But I think it's because we have a different type of control right now. And they're this close away from taking all our rights away. And the thing is, which I'm not sure if she's going to mention because this is solely about us and how we're used as guinea pigs. But I think what we have to recognize also is that in some regard, we have to pan out the picture and realize in a lot of ways is happening to all of us. What's going on now currently while we have to wear masks, and this is an experiment on everybody. So although we are the guinea pigs and they do practice on this first, they do label us as the faces of the worst. I think that we do have to recognize that this shit is being done to all of us. This is about global control, right? So I think we need to acknowledge that as well. But this eugenic shit that we about to get into, that's why I mentioned it in that last chapter, because it smells like it sounds like it felt like it looked like it. So that's been a long ongoing process too, because when they were digging deep with that one doctor, Dr. Butler, when they was getting in his ass about the historical abuse, um they had she had mentioned something about whitewashing us, but they didn't get to go that deep because they was playing them on their time. They was playing them on how many sessions they got. They was just playing games with the motherfuckers. It reminds me of those doctors, which I accidentally deleted everything in my phone this weekend from my nephew. The video of those doctors, they banned that. Run that dry. They banned that video everywhere. Okay, with the doctors that came together talking about the chlorhydroxine, how it would help the people with lung problems and shit like that, and or with, I don't want to say the word, but with the pandemic and shit. I feel like the powers that shouldn't be, I feel like that's currently happening now, and we're being challenged now. But I really am enjoying reading this book because it's giving me a good understanding about how they do these experimentations and they put out this propaganda to make it seem like um just to fuck us over. You know what I'm saying? Just to fuck us over. I was trying to think of something else I was gonna say, but because I was thinking about how they got Run DMC from Run DMC, they got Spike Lee, they got Hank Aaron. When they first administered the shot, they had that black nurse. You know, they got all these black people promoting this shit. But they're not talking about all the other people who are dying. They're not talking about a whole bunch of people who's like, um, my grandmother didn't have no COVID. She had a heart attack, but that's what they put on the death certificate. You know, my dad didn't have no COVID. He had a stroke, but that's what they put on the death certificate. Like, they're not talking about that shit. And I feel like with them changing the narrative to us being the primary focus of this new experiment, I feel like we're kind of living through the same things. And I think with them saying it's a whole pandemic, it makes it easy for us to be blinded to that fact. You know what I'm saying? Because we can say, oh, for those who are not able to see, right? For those who can't see, they're not going to be able to see because they're like, oh, this is affecting everybody. This is affecting everybody. They're not going to be able to see how the narrative has switched to look at those preconditions: hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, um, breathing problems, um, 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 all those diseases that come from bad, poor diets, bad environments, you know, all kind shit that stems from like the slave plate, the slave diet, the slave mentality, the slave environment. It all stems from that. And they're using that information against us. You know what I'm saying? Even when one of my family members got diagnosed with diabetes, you know, just out the blue, she was just real sick, just bam, real sick, right? You know, they told her that she could eat pork as a lean meat while she's on the hospital bed. Just instead of soda, just drink diet soda. How about you not do that shit at all, my nigga? How about you eat a plant-based diet, my nigga? You know what I'm saying? I don't know. So I'm interested to see what she's gonna expose in this motherfucking part two, because I think it's gonna get deep. It's gonna get fucking deep, yo. So anyway, it's 8 o'clock. We out early. So tomorrow I'm gonna come through early again so we can knock it out and I can get to bed on time and shit like that. Straight from work, back to work. Okay. I go from one computer to the next. Okay. Well, I hope y'all enjoyed that. We halfway through the book. Okay. So that means we're gonna be touching some other books, and I'm hype about that shit. Okay. So thank you for your support, y'all. I really appreciate all y'all. I appreciate you stopping through, showing me some love. Please share. You know, I'm trying to break that algorithm. I can't seem to get past 738. I'm trying to get to 1,000. So I appreciate your support, and just let your partners know if they like this kind of shit, because a lot of people don't like this kind of content. So I get it. But if you know somebody that do, put them on and we could all get down. They could be a Care Bear too, because we give all the fucks. We care. Okay? We give all the fucks. We don't walk around like we don't give a fuck. We give all the fucks. Okay? So anyway, peace, love, and hair grease and all that jazz. Share if you care, share if you dare, especially if you're a Care Bear. Have a good one, y'all. I'm out. Peace.